The time is 3:36 p.m. on October 25th, 2019. My name is Mickey, and I am the producer of Ye Olde Backyard Bullshit podcast. And first things first, we'd like to issue an apology to all of our fans. It has been quite a while since we have recorded a proper episode, and which has led us to go on a impromptu hiatus. Unfortunately, due to health, work, and collegiate reasons, sometimes it's just difficult to get 4 people on the same Discord server at the same time to record an episode. So to make sure y'all aren't completely starved of content until we can record a proper episode, we're going to be introducing a new segment into the show called One-on-One with the Mick, where myself, being the Mick and E, will be one-on-one interviews with some other folks on the podcast, some folks we find interesting, and hopefully pretty soon we're going to have some special guests on here, some from the local news, sports media organizations here in Ye Olde, Dallas, and maybe even some YouTubers. Who knows? Stay tuned for that. But for now, our first guest in One-on-One with the Mick is one of the co-founders of the Backyard Bullshit podcast and one of the original co-hosts, Coolhand.
How's it going, everybody? It's good to be back.
Yes, this is the first time we've actually done an in-person podcast in quite a while, wouldn't you say?
It's been quite a bit. It's been a long, long time.
Yes, I want to say, I don't know if this is the last one we did, but I remember when we did a podcast right after the last year's World Series ended?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
We'll have to talk to Dealer and see if we can do that again. That'd be fun. We're 2 games into it. All right, so Coolhand. Can you tell we're out of practice, y'all? So Coolhand, some folks I've noticed some viewers have been asking me, Coolhand says he likes this team, but he speaks positively about this team, and is he really? One day he says he likes San Antonio, the next day, he's a Houston boy. What is the deal, Coolhand? What teams are you actually fond of?
All right, well, I'll go through the whole gambit. I'll go through 5 sports. I'll say my teams for baseball, football, hockey, soccer, and basketball. Okay? Not necessarily in that order, but I'll just get through them. First and foremost, everything is Texas Tech number 1. Actually, that's not true. It's USA number 1, Texas Tech number 2, and then Penn State number 3. That's the order of my teams in general. Then you get into professional sports, Dallas Stars. That's my number 1 hockey team by far. They're my favorite professional sports franchise. Even though hockey is not my favorite sport, baseball is actually my favorite sport. The Dallas Stars, they've given me so much happiness. The '99 World Cup I'll never forget it. That is a goal, by the way. And then so for hockey, obviously it's the Stars. Anything college related is Texas Tech, pretty much, and then Penn State. For football, NFL, I am a Cleveland Browns fan. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Baker, I am still a Cleveland Browns fan somehow through all the trials and the tribulations. Somehow I can even consider changing my team multiple times. I just can't do it. Just can't bring myself to do it. And then we'll go. So my favorite basketball team is the Spurs. I am a big Spurs fan. Now, I did grow up in Houston, and until I moved to San Antonio in the late 2000s, essentially, I moved there in 2009. I was actually a Rockets fan. And then when I chose to become a Spurs fan, while I still cheer on the Rockets, the Spurs are still my number 1 team. Baseball, I am an Astros and Rangers fan. It is basically 50-50. I catch a lot of flack from both sides. Really, it's not a right answer for anybody except for me. But I grew up in Houston and Dallas, and so living in both cities growing up, back when they were still in different leagues, I think that really allows me to be a fan of both teams and still hope they both go on to do good things each and every year. So we've done baseball, football, soccer. Oh, I haven't done soccer. So my number one team is U.S. national team, always will be. My favorite club team is Liverpool. My grandmother's actually from Liverpool, and so that's why I'm a Reds fan. I'm also a big Houston Dynamo fan. I actually went to the very first Houston Dynamo game ever, and it's actually one of my favorite sports stories, which we might get into later. So those are kind of my teams. I just, that's I'm a little all over the place. I'm, growing up in Houston, you'd think I'd be more of a Houston fan, but I'm just not as much as I guess maybe I should be. I catch a lot of flack for that.
All right. So you said that despite the fact that hockey is not your favorite sport, the Stars are your favorite sports franchise, eclipsing the Dynamo, the Astros, the Spurs even. That caught me by surprise. So why is the Dallas Stars your favorite sports franchise?
I think part of it is in all the other sports, I have other teams that I kind of like. But in hockey, it's really the Stars and everybody else. I have a little bit of love for the Penguins, but in the grand scheme of things, I really can't stand any other team in hockey other than the Stars. In football, I kind of like the Cardinals a little bit. I'm a little bit of a Saints fan. In basketball, I still have some love for the Rockets. That kind of stuff. But it's Stars and everybody else. Stars, way high. Little tiny Pittsburgh Penguins. And then everybody else I just can't stand. I hope they all lose.
So you can't stand every other NHL team other than the Penguins and Stars. Why can't you, why do you just loathe them so much?
I don't know. It's just a pure hate. I don't know if it maybe because I became a hockey fan a little later in life. I grew up watching baseball and football with my dad. And then the Rockets runs in the mid-'90s, kind of integrated me with all those. But I did not become a hockey fan until 1996 when I moved to Dallas. And I started watching it on TV. And then my dad took me to my first Stars game. And I was sold. I loved it. Mike McDonough was amazing. That was also when they were starting to get really good, too. So I felt like I was there for part of the process of them becoming the Stanley Cup champion in '99. I watched all that happen. And it was just, it was just an exciting time in my life. It's my first real championship that I watched every moment of. Even the two Rockets championships in the mid-'90s, I didn't really watch those. I watched some of the playoffs and stuff, but that '99 Stanley Cup year, I watched every game.
How much of your first Stars game in '96 do you remember when you went with your dad?
I don't remember much of it. I just remember this is great. This was worth every penny. This was, hockey in person, there's nothing like it. There's not an experience like it. Basketball, sort of like that. College football, that's a little different. It's just a completely different atmosphere. But on a day-to-day level, just hockey, it just brings so much excitement, so much energy, and that it's happening all the time. College football, it only happens once a week. Whereas in hockey, these guys are playing 4 games a week. And so to be able to bring that much energy and that much skill and that much talent for that amount of time, it really just hit me, and I just love it.
Well, since Stars are your favorite franchise, is there a specific... You've gone to a lot of games. You and I have gone to a few games ourselves together. Is there a specific game that's your favorite that you saw in person? Or
are we just talking Stars only? Are we talking...
Let's go Stars only, and then we'll expand into the other 4 sports here soon.
So I went to opening day for the Stars against the Blackhawks. This was probably about 10 years ago, 10 years ago. My buddy Adam was actually getting married that weekend at not far from the stadium, and so they were doing the rehearsal dinner. So I went to the game, and I saw they broke glass. They actually broke a piece of glass in that game. A guy from the Blackhawks got hit so hard that they broke the glass. So that was pretty cool. That's probably my favorite Stars memory, is them breaking the glass on opening night.
Against the Blackhawks. Well,
and against the hated Blackhawks. Of course, they're all hated. So,
hell of a way to make a statement on an opening night. So that covers hockey. The Houston Dynamo, you said. When did you become a fan of them?
So they moved to Houston in 2006 from San Jose, and my girlfriend at the time, we're like, hey, let's go to the game. You know, this is something you don't get to do very often, is go to the very first game of a franchise. And so my sister was actually going to the University of Houston at the time, and she was living on campus. And so the Dynamo actually played on campus at the University of Houston at the time. And so I got her parking pass. All right, so I parked for free, okay? And then we went up to the gate and tried to buy tickets, and they said they didn't print enough tickets for the game to just go ahead and go on in.
Wow.
So I parked for free. I didn't pay to get into the game. Then I saw a guy get a hat trick, and I saw a guy have a bicycle kick goal, all in that game.
Do you remember who the Houston Dynamo were playing?
I don't.
Do you remember if the game was close? Because it's 4 goals.
No, they beat the crap out of them. It was like 5-1 or something.
Oh, geez. Germany versus Brazil all over again.
Yeah.
Or maybe a precursor to that. And so you've just been hooked ever since. Were you a fan of soccer prior to that, or?
Yeah, I've been a fan of soccer since the 1998 World Cup. I was living in Venezuela, and that was the very first time I really got exposed to what international soccer really means to the world. You know, back then it was still kind of sheltered in the U.S., even though it was right after the U.S. had hosted the World Cup. You know, soccer's really only taken shape here over the last 5 to 7 years, whereas back then it was still kind of a fringe sport in the United States. And so when I was living in Venezuela, I mean, they would throw these huge parties, even though Venezuela's awful at soccer, they're a baseball country. They would throw these huge parties when Brazil or Italy would win, because there's a lot of Venezuelans of Italian descent. And so anytime the teams win, they just throw these huge parties. I remember getting stuck in traffic. It took us like 2.5 hours to get home, just because Italy had won a World Cup game. Just like a regular group stage, too, not even like the hardcore stuff. And so that's kind of when I became a fan of soccer, started tapping into my roots. That's why I'm a Liverpool fan, you know.
Yes, I was going to ask you, was your mother being from the Liverpool area, is that what did I say?
Mother.
Oh, sorry. Grandma Coolhand. Was the fact that she was from the Liverpool area, is that what sparked you to become a fan of the team, or did you need a international team and Liverpool just happened to be on your radar anyway?
Well, you know, it used to not be that easy to watch soccer in America. You know, it was only special occasions. Even the World Cup, the 98 World Cup, I had to watch in Spanish when I was stateside, because they weren't showing it on like ABC or ESPN or anything. It was only being showed on Telemundo. And so and I'm talking about the quarterfinals and the semifinals, you know, the big matches. And so you know, I started exploring around, trying to find a team. Like I said, I decided to go back with my roots, and I felt Liverpool was a good call. You know, they're kind of a classic team. And at the time, Liverpool was also owned by Dan Gillardi, who owned the Stars and the Rangers.
When you say Rangers, do you mean the New York Rangers, the hockey team, or the Texas Rangers?
No, the Texas Rangers, the baseball team.
One man owned 3 professional sports teams.
Correct.
Good Lord.
And so I thought that was an easy transition for me. With the local flavor. Now Liverpool's actually owned by the Boston Red Sox.
Huh.
Well, Manchester United, arguably the biggest club in the world, is owned by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers owner.
I thought the biggest soccer club in the world was like one of the Spanish teams.
Well,
like
I mean,
Real
it depends
Madrid.
on what day of the week you're talking about.
That's fair. So, you said that when you're a Stars fan, you love the Stars, you have a modicum of respect or likability for the Pittsburgh Penguins, then everyone else you just can't stand.
Right.
And soccer, or I guess football, as the rest of the world calls it, would you say it's similar with the Houston Dynamo and Liverpool? And it's like you like those two teams, then everyone else can go eat shit? Or is it like, well, I like these teams?
It's so different in soccer. So maybe the rest of the Premier League, I'm whatever. I'm a little bit of a Tottenham fan. I like Harry Kane a lot. But there's so many teams out there that are so good. And because everything's done in different leagues, I'm kind of a Barcelona fan. I like AC Milan in Italy. There's just so many teams that you can like, and so many big players, and they play in so many big tournaments. We don't really catch it as much here in America, but when I was unemployed, the only thing on at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday is UEFA Champions League soccer. So you're watching the best players in the world go up against each other. I mean, some of these club teams over in Europe are more stacked than their international squads. And so it's just crazy to watch how good these guys really are and how athletic they are. And so I because it's not local, I guess, is the answer, is that I really haven't had the time to grow the hate for other teams. I don't like Manchester United. They're a big rival of Liverpool. That was a bunch of pompous assholes. I don't like Arsenal. They're in London. They're a bunch of pompous assholes too. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not like hockey where it's, well, fuck you. Like, you're not the Stars. You can fuck off. Like, it's hard for me to even watch. I can watch any baseball game. I can watch any football game, even college. It's hard for me to watch other teams play hockey because I don't care.
Fair enough. So blah 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 blah. Liverpool has their, divisional rivalries, quote unquote, within the Premier League. I take it, like Manchester United, Arsenal,
Chelsea.
Yeah, Chelsea. You don't seem as fired up about beating them as opposed to like when the Stars beat the Blackhawks or someone.
Everton actually plays down the street from Liverpool.
Like, do you know how much of a drive that'd be? Or
It's like a mile.
Oh, so within walking distance.
Yeah, they literally if you take an overhead look of Liverpool, you can see the two stadiums in one little shot.
Have you actually been to that part of England?
No, I've never been to England.
Oh no, I'm shocked considering how traveled you are, Mr. I've lived in Venezuela for a year. Yeah. So that covers the. Let me ask you: is there, as an American by choice, as you've previously described yourself, is there a different dynamic as an American rooting for an American soccer team as opposed to an American rooting for an international team?
Well, you just don't. You don't have the international support of the MLS like you do the U.S. support of these international squads. So, really, right now, the most important thing in American soccer is the U.S. national team, whereas most of Europe, it's their local leagues or the Champions League. And so the MLS is compared to Division II, the second division of English soccer. And so until we can start producing better players and the U.S. becomes, even individual player-wise, a better known entity with the rest of the world soccer, no one's really going to give the MLS the respects. And if you look at it, we've come a long way in the 23 years since the MLS has come on. If you watched the MLS back when it first started, it was garbage. Absolute trash to watch. The quality of play now is through the roof. They're filling football stadiums. I mean, Seattle fills CenturyLink for every game. The Atlanta United team, they fill this new stadium in Atlanta that the Falcons play at every game. So these things are starting to sell out. You're going to start seeing more soccer-only stadiums. It is on the grow. It will be. In the next 10 years, you'll see American soccer really blow up.
Now, do you think in that 10 years the Major League Soccer will switch from the league paying the players to the clubs playing the players like it does overseas?
I don't think so. At least not, maybe not 10 years, maybe in 20 years that happens. Because right now, first off, the league's just growing too fast in order for them to be able to justify that. I mean, they just added the 29th franchise a week ago, and they're going to probably add a 30th not too long after that.
Who's the 29th franchise?
Sacramento got a team.
That's right. Sacramento did.
And then the 30th team will be, St. Louis or something. And so that's as many teams as the NBA.
Yeah, 30.
And without nearly the revenue.
Yeah, you bring up a good point.
And they can't. One thing the MLS learned in the early days, there's only 3 teams left from the beginning. Well, 4 teams left of the 8 teams that started the league back in the beginning. And they've lost. I mean, Miami's lost a team. LA's lost a team. San Diego's lost a team. There have been so many teams that have folded. They're like, we got to prevent this from happening. We got to keep a team there long enough to put the foundation down to build to the next level. And that's going to happen. American soccer is eventually going to catch up to the rest of the world. That I do honestly believe. There's too much talent here. Really, if our best players, Odell Beckham Jr., was offered to be a professional player at 16 in England.
Damn.
But since he decided to go pro, since he wanted to play football, he ended up not taking that offer. But had he gone over there, I'd imagine he might be the best American soccer player to ever play.
Oh, what a world that would be. What a world that would be. So, I'm going to throw a hypothetical at you. All right. U.S. national women's team against Liverpool. Who wins?
Oh, Liverpool would smoke them. It'd be like 15-0.
So the skill gap is really that huge because
the
U.S. women's team just repeated World Cups, or did they three-peat?
No, they repeated.
Repeated, and then you're not even, and so you're saying that the women's team wouldn't even put up a fight against Liverpool.
No, they get smoked.
The skill gap is really that huge.
They might get lucky and score a goal, but no, that if you watch the men's game compared to the women's game, it's not even close. The accuracy, the passing, the speed with the skill, the speed with the dribbling, it's just not the same. It's just a more quality league. Even if you took an MLS squad, they would smoke them. It wouldn't even be close. You're talking at least 10-0.
So, do you think the U.S. should take more pride in the fact that their women's team is so good, or do you think they should kind of simmer down a bit and be like, hey, y'all are good, but I mean, let's be honest here?
Well, congratulations to them. There's still something to be said for being the best in the world at something. Katie Ledecky has this honor, okay? When Katie Ledecky swam in the last Olympics and smashed the world record, okay? The girl that got second broke the world record, and she beat her by 50 meters, okay? There's something to be said, far and away the best in the world. But Katie Ledecky would only finish about 250th among the men in that same year.
The times are that vast apart.
Yeah.
Jeez. So it's an impressive feat, but not as impressive?
No, it's still impressive. Look, still to be the best in the world at something is an amazing feat. Men, women, whatever. It's just women will never be able to compete on the level of men. At the elite stage level. The elite men will always be better. It's just there are so many factors that are involved in that, and it's not, I'm not being sexist about it. It's nothing like that. It's just realism. There's a reason why women haven't been able to compete with men in basically anything. Even Billie Jean King beating that dude back in the day. That guy was 55 years old and hadn't competed in 20 years when she beat him, and she was in her prime, and she barely beat him.
Now, what sport is this?
Tennis.
Tennis, okay.
That's the one thing people always bring to the front. Well, Billie Jean King beat, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but she...
Well, doesn't that illustrate the issue right there? Billie Jean King beat a nobody?
Well, supposedly he was actually a pretty good player in his prime. He was like a top 10 kind of guy in his prime. But he also hadn't competed in 20 years.
So that'd be like, in other terms, that'd be like the best WNBA player beating Michael Jordan now.
It'd be like Serena Williams beating like Pete Sampras now.
Now, for those who don't know, Pete Sampras is how far out of his prime?
He probably stopped being a good player in the late 90s.
Late 90s.
Yeah.
Do you think it'd be a close matchup, or do you think Serena would smoke him?
I think Pete Sampras would still win, actually. If he really gave it his all. Because John McEnroe said this. Serena Williams has by far the hardest women's serve on the tour. It's about 190th among the men. And so it's just not... They're not as fast. They don't hit as quality balls.
It's really two separate leagues.
It's really just two. Yeah, it's harder to tell in tennis. It's probably the closest sport between men's and women's. But if you really sit down and watch it, it's a completely different game.
What about golf?
Well, Anna Sorsen tried. And I would say golf probably would be the closest, but the women would need hit off the men's tee all the time. They still hit off the women's team in the LPGA. If they hit off the men's team all the time, because you can make up a difference. The thing is, a man could have such a poor round that a woman could beat him in golf. Like, if you have a bad hole, you're going to be so far behind the eight ball that women can beat you. But to be like a top 20 player, no, that would never happen. They just can't drive the balls far enough, and therefore they can't get enough loft on their close shots.
A league of their own, indeed. Well, let us switch leagues here and discuss your love of two NBA teams, the Spurs and the Rockets. But let's focus on the Spurs, for example, for a second, because for the viewers, they might have picked up over the months that we've been doing this podcast that almost every single time we talk about basketball, you tell a very specific player to fuck off.
Yeah, fuck Ray Allen.
Yeah, it's Ray Allen of what team?
At the time, the Miami Heat.
All right, Now, you've gone into a little bit of a detail about why you hate Ray Allen so much, but now we have an opportunity for you to give full disclosure of why you despise Ray Allen, and specifically that moment in the NBA Finals.
Okay, so going on in that time, most of my friends considered me to be an unlucky sports fan. Any team that I cheered for was just garbage, okay? And so, the Browns were awful. The Astros were miserable. The Rangers weren't all that great. Now, they were just coming off some World Series victories, or World Series appearances, but it's not like they've been good. The Stars have been struggling for a little while. It just hadn't been a bad run, and so people didn't want me as their team sports fan. And so Spurs finally make it. My very first year as a Spurs fan, they were the number 1 seed and lost to the Memphis Grizzlies as an 8 seed.
What year was that?
That'd have been like 2011, I think, 2012, something like that.
Sounds like the 11, because I do remember the Spurs getting knocked out early that playoff season.
And so, I was still catching a lot of flack about it. And so that 2013 run, for that Game 6, because that was Game 6, that wasn't Game 7. That was actually Game 6. And Ray Allen made that damn shot. Well, my buddy and I were like, screw it, we're gonna go balls to the wall. So we got VIP at a club. Got a couple bottles of champagne. And we're about to pop those bottles of champagne when Ray Allen made that unbelievable shot to help the Heat win Game 6 of that series and go on and just take Game 7 and win the series. And so I'm sitting there about to pop this bottle of champagne because it was literally 30 seconds away from that game getting over. And he makes that shot, and I've never been so crushed in sports in my life. That at least I wasn't involved in. And yes, fuck Ray Allen.
Now, you said you got VIP at a club in San Antonio, I take it. Do you remember how much that bill was that night?
Not cheap. It was like $500-$600 between the two of us.
Good Lord. And well, how was it cathartic at all the very next season when the Heat got curb stomped by your Spurs?
There's a little bit of that. There's also a little bit of kind of just relaxation. Like we actually did it. Because it wasn't really, since it was such a one-sided series. I mean, it was the most lopsided series ever at the time. I don't know if it still is or not. And if you take like total points, it was the most points ever, margin of victory ever in an NBA Finals. So there was something to be said for that, but not having the stress that this might go down to 6 or 7 games, where, you're going to have to make shots like the Ray Allen shot. As I said, the 4 wins the Spurs had, I think they won them all by at least 20 points. And so the games were never really in doubt, other than the game they lost, which they lost by a point or 2. But the 4 games they won, I mean, the final game of the series, you knew about halfway left in the fourth quarter that there was no chance. And you kind of like start celebrating and not have to worry about it. And so I almost wanted to have the anxiety about it, but it was also kind of nice not to have to worry.
Now, you've stated on the show a few times, mainly during the first ever throwdown that we did. In fact, you and I were the contestants in that. You mentioned that LeBron James is your favorite player.
Well, that has actually since changed.
Oh my gosh, this is breaking news, folks. When did this happen?
It's when he filed for the trademark for Taco Tuesday, and
really? That's what it was?
The audacity of some son of a bitch to trademark Taco Tuesday, and he also wanted to trademark the in the Ohio State, a university he did not attend, by the way. And so that really pissed me off.
Why? Okay, why is it that this is what is the straw that breaks the camel back? Why not actually, yeah, why?
Well, because I think he got unfairly misjudged before. I think people hate him just because he's so good. I mean, he did go to 8 straight finals.
That is impressive.
I mean, even in a weak East, he still managed to do it. And that was with 2 different teams. It wasn't just the Heat, and it wasn't just the Cavs. It was both of them. And so there is something to be said for that. And he's a great player. I mean, he's the most physically dominating player to ever play the NBA. And you would think that would have been a center. But his ability to move with the ball and facilitate is just a whole different level.
Do you still think he's the GOAT?
I do think he's still the GOAT. I just lost faith in him as a person.
So, do you think... Okay, so whenever athletes prop themselves up, typically they get a lot of backlash. For example, Muhammad Ali, when he was boxing still, when he called himself the greatest, everyone was like, "You ain't shit." And then he went on to prove, "Yo, I'm the fucking greatest. I didn't stutter." And when then LeBron went on a podcast and said, "Hey, when I won the Cleveland that championship in 2016, that's how I know I was the GOAT." Did that statement at all change your position on him?
No, I mean, it's about confidence. I mean, this is, as a professional athlete, you have to be confident. Okay, you can never assume somebody's better than you. I've never believed in the underdog. Never believed in the underdog. You may not have supposed to have won, but as soon as you admit that everybody else is better than you, you've already lost.
All right. So what separates someone from like Muhammad Ali, where there was I don't know if I'm not too familiar in boxing history, but like in Muhammad Ali's case, there wasn't exactly a undisputed greatest boxer of all time until he came around and proclaimed that he was. So everyone was saying, no, you ain't shit. But in LeBron's case, he claims he's the GOAT, and yet he's in the conversation for being the GOAT with Michael Jordan, and some people are saying he's not even better than Kobe Bryant or Magic Johnson or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. What separates LeBron?
Well, it's an individual versus team sport game. So, boxing's individual. You can almost now. Obviously, these guys are way bigger, faster, stronger than they were, fighting back in the day. But it's just you versus another guy. And so you can prove your worth. In the grand scheme of things, basketball is still a team sport. And you still have to, Michael Jordan still had to have Steve Kerr and John Paxson and Bill Wennington to make all these big shots, get all these big rebounds for him. In order for him to make that shot over Byron Russell, they still had to be in that game. And you need other people around you to facilitate that. You may be the greatest player of all time, but if you're playing with 4 fucking scrubs who just give up 1,000,000 points, you're never going to be able to win.
So but wouldn't that same argument apply to LeBron as well?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, you're just comparing two different things. For him to believe he's the greatest of all time, I don't really care about that. He's gone out and he's proved it. He's proved in his mind that he's been the greatest of all time. And there's something to be said for that. And the numbers do kind of back it up. He has more assists. He has more rebounds than Jordan. Per game. We'll go per game. But people don't look at that. They're like, oh, well, Jordan scored in the big moments and all that crap. Had that been LeBron James instead of Ray Allen taking that shot, people would never even question.
Didn't Ray Allen get that rebound because LeBron missed a 3?
I don't remember. I try to block that out.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So you mentioned a few statistics there. What counter arguments do you often disagree with when it comes to MJ being the GOAT over LBJ?
Well, everybody says teammates, but Jordan had good teammates too. He still had Scottie Pippen, and I'd argue his role players were better than what LeBron had on the Heat. I know he had Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade, but they won that series with fucking Birdman starting at center.
Chris Anderson?
Yeah.
I thought they put Bosh at center at that point.
Bosh was having the leg issues, so he wasn't playing as much. And so the Birdman started, I'm pretty sure, every game in that finals.
I'd have to go back and check.
But the Birdman, garbage.
And then again, Michael Jordan.
Norris Cole.
Then again, Michael Jordan never really had a good center either. Who do you have? Tony Kukoc? Or am I thinking of
he was a forward. He had Bill Wennington. That's not saying much. Dennis Rodman.
He was more of a Chris Bosh role. Like, he was more of a forward than he was a center.
Yeah, but he was in there to rebound.
And Chris Bosh didn't do the same, though?
No, well, I mean, Chris Bosh could also score. Dennis Rodman didn't do anything but rebound.
So I feel like the argument you'd then face is, oh, well, Dennis Rodman only defended and rebounded, and yet Michael Jordan still got into 3 straight finals.
I'm not saying that he didn't have scrubs as well, but I think overall his role players were better than the role players that LeBron had on most of those teams.
How heavy of an argument do you think is the fact that LeBron was in a weak East? How heavy of a
and that affects things, but the East wasn't that strong back in Michael Jordan's time. I know they had the Pistons and the Celtics were dying at that point.
I mean, they had Shaq and Penny Hardaway in Orlando. They had the Knicks with Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, but he didn't come in until '92, and then Shaq left in '97.
Michael Jordan still had to go through them a few times, though.
Oh, that's true. But really, basketball was also not as deep then. That's also my other argument. Is
the West wasn't exactly a joke back then either.
No, but look at the quality of players now compared to the quality of players back then. The league was way more star-driven back then. They make it more star-driven now just because of social media and those kind of things. But the talent is so deep in the NBA right now. Look, it was a big deal when Michael Jordan slammed from the free throw line in the slam dunk contest. Now you have the last guy on the Jazz bench who can do that. Like, these guys are way more athletic. They're way bigger. That's part of the reason why the center's actually somehow phased out, because these guys have gotten so big that the center's not this massive person among humans anymore. They're slightly... I mean, you have your Taco Falls who are fucking monsters, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think something you'd run into, though, is that nowadays centers are asked to do more. Like, you still have your, like, Rudy Gobert's on the Jazz, who are kind of more your traditional centers, where they're more defenders and rebounders and shot blockers. But back then, like, a main argument you hear nowadays is that if you put players that play now in the 90s era, they'd get their asses handed to them because of the way more aggressive defensive style that was played back then.
Yeah, but if you put LeBron James in the 90s, he's going to still dominate.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I'm not saying... Like, do you think his productivity wouldn't fluctuate a tiny bit, either up or down?
I think he might be better with his strength. He part of what makes LeBron so good is he's just so strong for his athletic ability.
Right.
His ability to get to the bucket. Like, yeah, they may have hacked him more back then, but those little pussies back then wouldn't have stopped him getting to the bucket. I can tell you that. Billy and Beard might have, like, come down with an elbow to his face a couple of times and tried to stop it. But he's so much bigger than those guys were.
Like, size?
Just size-wise, strength-wise. I mean, he plays the same position as Larry Bird. Larry Bird ain't stopping him backing down in the post. It's not happening. It's not happening.
Do you think Pippen would?
No.
Not Pippen?
No. They were too wiry back then. Now, if you give those guys today's training and see what those guys would look like now, that's part of it too. Our health understanding. I mean, those guys used to go out and get fucking hammered after every game. Now it's like, well, that doesn't happen as much. Go home, get your rest. We have an understanding of how to maximize our bodies better now. Back then you're just really good at a sport and you played. But now, there's so much money involved, and that's part of it too. I've always said that the money has been the best and worst thing to ever happen to sports. The increase in the amount of money that these guys started getting, because it made it to where you really had to be. I mean, football players back in the 60s and 70s used to have real jobs in the off season. Like, they couldn't just play football. They had to do something else in the off season.
I think that was the case with the NBA too.
It was the case in all sports really until the 90s. 80s, 90s, it really started changing in a different direction where they were getting percentages of what the league was making, and that kind of changed everything.
Do you think for each sport there's like an athlete that kind of propelled that change to like, okay, yeah, these are superstars, we need to pay them accordingly for each sport?
Well, I mean, Babe Ruth was the first person to make $25,000.
You know how much that is in today's money?
Yeah, it's 119
million.
No, it's 249,000 or something.
And that was his annual salary,
Yeah.
Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
For a baseball player, wouldn't that still, in today's money, wouldn't that be like significantly underpaid?
Yeah, absolutely. Like he basically made nothing. He made most of his money on sponsorships. He was really the first athlete to like make more money in sponsorships than he did on the field. And so he kind of changed the game. He's the really revolutionary. Curt Flood was the first one to file for free agency in baseball.
Who?
Curt Flood. He was an outfielder for the Cardinals. But Babe Ruth really is the one that's like, no, you a-holes are making a ton of money. I want a bigger piece of the pie. But here's the thing. Like in the NFL, 51% of all the money that's made in the NFL goes to the players. In most real life scenarios, when it comes to business, labor's less than 20%. And so they got a little greedy. And I think that's why we're going to end up some strikes and some lockouts and all kinds of stuff happening. But
speaking of strikes and lockouts and all money being shifted around, we're seeing the NCAA come under increasing amounts of fire for not paying their athletes. Do you think colleges will ever start paying their athletes, or do you think that's not going to happen ever?
So in California, they basically said you can start making money on your own likeness. Not necessarily paying them for playing the sport, but if you do something outside of if you do like a calendar shoot or something for a car dealership or something, you'll get paid for that.
Like a shoe deal for Nike or something?
Yeah, sort of. And that's what my big worry is, that you open up a can of worms when you do something like that. I believe in amateurism. I think there's something to be said for amateurism. First off, the average college scholarship for an athlete's worth about $50,000. The average person in this country only makes about $30,000. Okay, a lot of these guys come from poor backgrounds, but you know what they do have when they're on scholarship? They have a place to sleep and they have a place to eat every day. And so there is something to be said for that.
A common criticism of the NCAA is that like an athlete can be as amazing as they are, but the instant they get injured, they lose their scholarships, and then they're on their own.
That's not completely true. There are stuff put into place where you're supposed to stay on at least do an academic scholarship if you get hurt. It doesn't work completely that way, and yeah, they can cut you for getting injured. But I mean, I lost my scholarship, for example. But the problem is when you start paying these guys, you can only afford to play football players, maybe some basketball players. But there's 24 other Division I sports that are competed for at the national level, at the NCAA level. And what you're going to start seeing when you start paying these players is you're going to see wrestling and swimming and soccer and all these smaller sports start disappearing. And they deserve to go to school on scholarship just as much as some football player. Yeah, I know they bring more money in for the school, but this is, for most of these people, this is the highest level they'll ever be able to compete at. I mean, you have to be so you have to be great in football to be an NFL player and make a living at it. You have to be the best of the world to really make it in the smaller sports. And they do just as much athletic stuff as these football players are. They deserve to be on scholarship to represent the school. But because people want to pay out NFL or these athletes that are going to go on to get paid anyways, you don't know what you're getting out of an 18-year-old kid when they walk onto campus. You may end up paying this guy all this money. I remember there's a guy named Bryce Brown, okay? And he did play in the NFL. He was like a 7th-round pick. He played for the Eagles for a little bit. He was the number one recruit in college, okay? Everybody was going after him. He ended up playing for 3 different universities and just basically being a scrub compared to what his hype was. Well, now you've paid this kid for doing nothing. He hasn't done anything, when they're bringing him on campus. And so, but that's going to be a big recruiting tool. Well, this is how much we can pay you. But I will also not get mad at the kid for taking money. Because what's the number one reason why you go to college?
To make more money?
To make more money in your life. And so, take Reggie Bush losing his Heisman.
Losing his Heisman?
When he lost his Heisman, the basic thing was a booster had bought his parents a house. All right. Well, Reggie Bush grew up poor as shit. All right. And the fact that he was able to turn his talent into getting the house, I'm not going to get mad at that. So I am conflicted, I guess, in that sense, but I don't think you can start playing players because I think you're opening up a Pandora's box that will never be closed.
And now another common criticism of the NCAA, or maybe not of the NCAA itself, but this might not be the right word, but the culture it invites. Like you're seeing more and more scandals where college will essentially fake an athlete's grade level in order for them to keep playing. I know North Carolina got in trouble for this a few years ago for their football program in fact, there was a documentary that came out a few years ago that was on this very subject where a bunch of former NCAA football players said, we're asked, what classes did you take? And they all said Swahili. And then the interviewer asked them, do you speak any Swahili? And they said, no. So do you think that is, so as we see more and more of these corruption scandals, I guess, get unearthed or leaked or whatever you want to call it, do you think, from your experience and from your perspective, is it more or less corrupt than what we're seeing, and is it going to change for the better or for the worse, or do you think it's just going to keep on chugging?
So that actually brings up why you can't pay players, because you're going to start seeing more of this scandal, because now they're paying these guys, right, to play, but if they're not making the grades, they're paying them for nothing. And so, like I said, you're opening up a Pandora's box when you allow these things to happen. And there's so much money tied up in college football. I mean, the reason why these small teams play these big teams and, just to get their ass kicked is a lot of times they will make their entire athletic budget in one game, going out there and getting their ass kicked by an Alabama or something. And so you can't... The scandals will always be there. Where there's an opportunity to take advantage of a situation is always going to be taken advantage of. If anybody's ever surprised when they see some of this stuff, I'm not talking about like the rape cases, stuff like that. I'm talking about, point shaving. And that would be one reason to pay athletes is, point shaving incidents would, kind of go away. But it just, it will. There will always be corruption, and that's part of it too. Is you're giving scholarships to guys that frankly shouldn't be in college. Like there's a big percentage of college football players that have no business being in college. None. They don't. Their academics aren't there. They don't have the drive to be there. The only reason why they're on campus is because they're really good at football. And so you're walking a fine line. You'll always be walking a fine line. Even if you start paying the guys, it'll get worse. I do think the one and done rule needs to go. I think that's absolute garbage.
The one and done rule
in basketball, where you have to go for at least a year, or you have to be out of high school for at least a year before the NBA can draft you. I think that's dumb.
Like with Zion Williamson, for example?
Yeah. Like, there was no reason for him to go to Duke. He should have just gone straight to the NBA. And I think it's also helped making us lag a little bit behind the rest of the world when it comes to international level type sports, is that you have to basically go to college here in order to compete. Whereas those guys are going professional at 16 and, competing on that sort of a level at an earlier age. Part of what Luka, is so far advanced to these guys that were coming in at the same time as him. We've been playing with real men for 3 years already. This wasn't a big deal for him. Whereas, and playing, 60, 70, 80 games a year, where these guys that have to go to college are only playing 30. And so they're just not getting the practice, not getting the experience. And now that the G League is more effective, and there's an efficient minor league system, that's why no one cares about baseball and hockey players when they get drafted. It's because there's efficient minor league systems. You didn't really have that in basketball. Even the G League is still not, I think, effective enough. I think they need to have another league below that, especially if they're not going to make kids go to college anymore. But it will also basically kill off the college game.
So it's do you think more athletes are going to start playing in Europe, for example? I mean, let's stick on basketball for a second, and play there for a few years instead of foregoing college.
Well, the only thing is in Europe, and you go at a young age, they don't really play a lot of young guys in Europe. It's a very experience-heavy league. They want you to have a few years before a professional before they'll really play you. Luka's a special example. Giannis was special. That's why they got playing time. But you remember what's his name? Brandon Jennings.
Name sounds familiar, but I can't put a face
High
to it.
top, played for the Bucks, lefty. He went to Europe for a year and basically never played.
Never.
Yeah, I think he was averaging 6 minutes a game or something.
Good Lord.
And so, for him, no, that wasn't the best experience to go over there and play in Europe. But like I said, now with the G League, which is truly a developmental system, they're going to play their young guys. And so, they're going to be able to go out there and play and get the experience they need against other elite athletes. Even those guys in the G League are pretty darn good. And so, you can work out your skills, get the experience that you need, and then move on to either Europe or the NBA.
Now, you mentioned the G League might become the developmental league of the NBA as opposed to college. What do you think about the NFL? Because their developmental league is the NCAA, but now we got the XFL coming back.
Well, if you're going to have a developmental league, it needs to run concurrent with the current NFL season, and you almost need to eliminate practice squads and essentially create minor league teams. But because there's so many players that you need for football. The cost effectiveness of that is it's just not there. I mean, the NFL Europe had a pretty good run as a developmental league, but then they changed the CBA and basically shut the NFL Europe down. And so there's just I'm not sure the NFL will ever be able to create something outside of college football to be able to compete on that level.
So do you think what are your predictions to the XFL? Do you think they're actually going to finish their season unlike the Alliance of American Football?
They'll have 3 or 4 years. First off, they're better set up than the AAF was.
How familiar are you with the XFL's previous attempt at existing?
I remember it very well. The problem their first time around was they tried to make it too different. They tried to make it too different from what normal football is. Too many unique things. And people still love football. Don't change what people love. Maybe bring some few different aspects into it. They would for the coin flip, they would chase after a ball and whoever picked it up won the coin flip. There's some ideas in there that were good, but like I said, they just try to make it too different from football, and you just can't do that. People love football. There's a reason why. And you can tell Vince McMahon learned that lesson. Also, the big difference between them and AAF is they already have a lucrative TV deal in place. The AAF should have never gone active without a lucrative TV deal in place. That's what killed them. But the XFL already has it lined up.
Will you be attending any Dallas Renegades games at the Globe Life Park?
I don't know. I'm certainly not going to go out of my way to watch it, but if it's on TV or I just happen to be around in town and someone's got an extra ticket, I'd probably go. I wouldn't say no, but I don't know. It doesn't really interest me all that much.
Well then, Coolhand, to wrap up this first inaugural episode of One-on-One with the Mick, do you have any closing thoughts, remarks? Do you want to tell Ray Allen to fuck off one more time?
I just want to throw in there fuck Walt Weiss as well.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to ask you about that another time.
That's the only playoff game I've ever been to with the Astros. Walt Weiss fucked us, but that's a whole different story. But I just want to say thanks to everybody out there for listening to us. We do appreciate it. And y'all keep it real. All
right. That was Coolhand for you. And this is Mickey, and thank you for watching the first episode of One-on-One with the Mick. We hope to have a proper episode recorded soon. Thank y'all for listening.